The next section is, are your senses lying to you? And this is another topic to think about throughout your day, and often to think about when you do experience something, to try and understand if you're experiencing it in its entirety. Are you experiencing the truth of it? As a society, or a race, I would say, we've been taught to rely on our physical senses: sight, hearing, taste, smell, touch. The 5 physical senses. There are other senses. Balance is technically a sense. A sense of balance is why it's called that. There are other senses we have, but those are the main 5 senses that we work with. What a lot of people don't think about is how those senses distort our reality. I wear glasses. I take these off. I'm a foot from my camera. My face on my camera is blurry. My room is completely blurred. If I relied on my sense of sight, I experience a completely different reality than people with 20/20 vision. The only reason I can experience a similar reality is because I have a tool. I have a tool called glasses that allow me to see close to what others see. And because I'm using this tool, and because there's distance between my eyes, and because they might be dirty, as they often get, especially now that my coatings are gone and I have cats. Because I use this tool, it's one of those things where it can be not the best sense of reality. If I have a spot, I might have a spot. Nobody else sees a spot. Where'd that spot come from? What is that spot? Why do I have a spot in my vision? Is it a glaucoma spot or something of that nature? No, it's just a spot on my glasses and I need to clean them. Am I colorblind? I'm not colorblind. I know people who are colorblind, but I explained this in an earlier video. Colorblind people experience the world differently. You can have one of those circles with like a 7 in it that's orange or yellow. I can see it. That's my reality. That 7 exists. But to a colorblind person, it won't exist. It's not real. It's not there. Hearing. Well, I'll back up on the site. A lot of people don't know that we see a fraction of the light spectrum. A fraction of it. And when I talk about a fraction of it, I mean a very small fraction of it. There's a reason we have all these tools to see other spectrums, other parts of the light spectrum in medical technology and science technology and all these different areas. X-rays, ultraviolet, infrared, all these things. We don't see any of that. We see what our eyes translate. We hear what our ears translate based on that same idea. We only hear a fraction of the sound spectrum, and that can be seen in nature with most of you probably have a dog or a cat. They can hear far more than a human can. Taste and smell. I don't talk about that too much because we don't really rely on them as far as our external reality. But taste and smell can also be affected. There are people who cannot smell things. With the recent pandemic, a lot of people lost their senses of taste and smell and experienced that firsthand. There are people who live lifetimes with those senses dulled or even completely gone. Touch is another thing. We don't actually touch anything. That's an interesting thing to think about. My hands are pressed together right now. They're touching. They're touching as far as we know, but they're not. This is the experience of the molecules, elements, whatever you want to say, atomic structure of my hands, repelling each other, of the forces repelling each other. And even though they're pressed together, they're still repelling each other. Those molecules never actually touch. There's empty space there. Our bodies are empty space. 99.9999 something empty space, because of how the energy and molecular structure exists. The only reason you can see me, the only reason you can touch me is because light hits those molecules and hits it at the right frequencies, at the right portions of the however that works. I think I'm using the word right frequency. Hits it, and then my body and my molecules react in a way that reflect it, emit it, or absorb it, which results in us perceiving those three things. But light can pass through things too. Energy can pass through things. The only reason my eyes see the physical world is because of the specific light spectrum that is reflected, emitted, or absorbed from objects. It's important to understand that. We don't see most of the light spectrum. So then you have your brain. People love to rely on the brain, the old noggin. But think about that for a second. Your brain collects data from the world around you. You interpret it with your senses, and then you interpret it based on what you know, what you've been taught as a child, what you know. And what a lot of people fail to realize is you can train your brain to do different things, to interpret data differently, or to completely ignore information. There's a reason when you look at something straight on, you might not see it, but you see it in the peripheral of your vision, because you have been trained as a young child to ignore those things that we don't want to see. Interdimensional beings, ETs, angels, all that. But then as you wake more, you start seeing them in your peripherals. You're seeing them in your peripherals because you still have the ability to see them. But your brain doesn't filter this out. This is all like fuzzy, static type of stuff. It filters what's right in front of you, what you're directly focused on. So then you see stuff here, and you get the true sense of reality as you see that stuff, as you begin to awaken that side of things. Then you get to a point where you really wake and you see, instead of seeing an orb or a flash of light here, you actually see it move around, and your brain no longer filters it. We can train and program our brains, which is exactly what the three-dimensional world and control structures have done for hundreds of years, especially in this technological age of media. Your brain can be trained to, my guys are saying, reflect, emit, or absorb information and ultimately change it. You have to start asking yourself as you go on this journey, what am I really sensing? What am I seeing? What are the physical senses? What are they giving me informationally? What am I missing? What are you missing? Because if you look at nature, bats have sonar, snakes have infrared, heat vision. What else do we have? Octopuses have tentacles, 8 tentacles, and they have neurons along all their tentacles, and they feel the world differently than us. Birds can sense magnetic fields and move with the fields. I think it's the platypus detects its prey through electromagnetics, or let me read this so I have it right. It does something very, very strange, and I have the book right here. Chameleons, this is an interesting one. Chameleons have 2 eyes that rotate independently. How do you think they see reality? They can have one eye looking that way. They can have one eye looking behind them. Like, that's completely, it's not an image put together like ours. You have 2 TV screens. I'll talk about that in a minute. The platypus detects electrical impulses of its prey. And you don't even want me to get started on the platypus. You have this creature that looks like a beaver or muskrat with a duck bill in venom, and I think the venom's in like its claws or something, and then it can sense electrical signal. Like this thing is not a creature of evolution or this earth, is what I'll say. It's one of those that I'm like, yeah, there's something fishy going on there. Bees can sense the Earth's magnetic field. Birds can too. The mantis shrimp sees 12 channels of color, not just 3 like humans. It detects ultraviolet light, polarized light, which we can't see with the naked eye. It can see 12 other channels, not 3. Imagine what kind of colors and what things we're missing out on the light spectrum. I mean, that's your proof right there that our reality is a false reality, because we don't have the senses to see everything or feel everything or hear everything. But we can use technology to do it. Now, the real question is, how do we experience these things? Energy. We have a third eye. We have a crown that can get downloads of information through light energy. But really, the third eye is like the chameleon. The third eye, when you open that gift, the third eye, it's right here, it's your pineal gland. You open that up, you start to see the world differently, because you actually start to feel like you have a third television. You have 2 that are dependent on each other and that form one image. Two images if you do this. And then you have a third up here. You have that third eye, third image. And the thing is, you can perceive an entirely different form of reality, because you can start to see energy. You see the energy, you get the downloads of information, you get all this other stuff that comes with all the chakra alignments, all these things, intuition, different chakra alignments, your heart space, all this stuff. You get all this information that builds the image of what's really around you. And people can experience that differently, so their reality can be different because of how they process and interpret the information. A lot of people might say, well, there's no eye here. There's a pineal gland there, but there's no physical eye. It doesn't matter that there's no physical eye, because it's an energetic one. But at the same time, you can even look in nature and find third eyes. You can find them on, I think sharks have remnants of third eyes. I know a lot of reptiles and amphibians do. Snakes, they have these little, I forget what they call them, but they're like, you can see images of some reptiles and stuff where they have this eye in the center. It's scaled over, but it's an eye. That's non-functional, I guess. Probably is functional, but to us it's non-functional. So they have physical representations of the third eye in the animal kingdom. Ours just isn't a physical eye. So you have to ask yourself, are your senses lying to you? And then when you understand that, okay, you go, well, how do I experience reality? And you start to go, well, I have a third eye, a spiritual third eye that all these teachers talk about. What does that mean if I open that up and have a third television screen? What does it mean if I have telepathy? Telepathy would be a sense. Intuition is a sense. What about other things like your energetic field expanding and something energetically hitting it and you being like, that's a sense. It's a sense of spiritual touch. Clairaudience, hearing disembodied voices that aren't there. Clairvoyance, seeing things. There are other clairs. There's one for each physical sense too: sight, touch, sound, taste, all that. Some people taste, some people smell. Most commonly you'll hear about clairaudience and clairvoyance. Clear vision and clear sight. Clear vision, clairvoyance, and clear hearing. Clear auditory, clairaudience. So you'll hear about these things and you can work on them to expand your ability to sense the truth of reality. But always remember, your senses are only as good as the information you're processing and how many of them you're using. Just because you're clairaudient, clairvoyant, and using all these other ones doesn't mean you're experiencing the full entirety of reality. We're only capable of experiencing the reality with the senses we have. To give you an example, we have a third eye, so people often think 2 eyes, now 3. I've been in a state of work with light grids where I had 30 eyes, 30 televisions going on at once, checking in on them, checking in on my different placements where I was astrally threaded together, looking at tree stumps, looking at the forest floor, looking at dirt, threading energy together as I jumped from spot to spot. You can have that. You can have all those televisions. It's not just the third eye. Third eye is your main eye. You can actually work it to have more, to experience something like the chameleon, where you have eyes pointed left, right, down, up, all over the place. So always question, are your senses lying to you? And then wonder, or not wonder, but work on building your spiritual senses and tuning them. You know, just as you can tune some of your own senses, we can tune, like I have bad eyesight, tune them with glasses, bring them into focus. Hearing, you can work on hearing if you want to hear multiple things at once in the physical. You can exercise your hearing so your brain processes the sound differently around you. And so you can focus in on a conversation while you're in a restaurant. You can zoom in on one conversation. You can do these types of things to train your hearing. You can train your eyesight. You know, detectives and people who can walk into a room and just know where everything is in one go because they've trained their eyesight and their brain to work together and process information differently than others. So they use the senses differently. So as you go on the journey, remember that senses are not to be relied on because everybody's senses are different. Some of them are lying to them. Some of them aren't showing them the full picture. And then if you open your spiritual senses, you actually have more senses than just the average person. And it completely changes your idea of what reality is. Thank you again for watching. My deepest gratitudes. And then we'll get into the next section, which is about imagination and creativity.